something we got a comment from a viewer earlier today who said, what I don't want is DC and STL. This negative campaigning has got to stop. It's a black eye on our awesome region. Has this been a little too nasty for your liking?
It's different. I mean, I can't remember in my adult life when we've had a county executive race that has been this contested, this heated, this hostile. So this is very different. I think we're plotting new ground in St. Louis County, and so I think it's fascinating.
So what does that mean? Why?
I think it's because they've been running against each other for 3 years. I think we said, like, Steve Stinger is going to run for county executive, and they had to sit there week after week after week in the council meetings with this building up. And I think that it's a referendum on each other, as you were saying earlier, that they really agree on most things as far as St. Louis County is concerned. And one is saying you're not prepared to do the job, and the other is saying you've done a poor job. So all that's left is to really throw mud at each other.
And at the end of the day, negative campaigning works. If you think about it, when we talk to our neighbors, we don't say, isn't it great that our elected officials passed a balanced budget for the last 10 years? They're going to say, no. Did you hear that so-and-so is doing this? And that negative campaigning sticks with voters. They share it, they spread it, and that's why we see so much of it.
In the contrast. I mean, I think that's how some people learn about issues, is they see contrast, and that's how they talk about it. And if it didn't work, people wouldn't do it.
Does this mean the incumbent is in trouble?
I mean, I think
campaigning.
I think, yeah, I do. I think when you're a 10-year incumbent and you've got to go harshly personal and negative, I think that does. When you have a challenger, they've got the hill to climb, so they're going to do much quicker and try to establish themselves much quicker. But if an incumbent has to bite and has to go negative and personal, then it's likely going to be a problem.
Unless I had said this last week on Donnybrook, if I really thought I was going to win, but yet I really don't like you, well, retribution is going to start near the election. So not only am I going to defeat you, I'm letting you know right now that the next 4 years, while we are both on this council, are going to be really tough on you.
Does that mean someone might be spending money in the primary thinking that November was not going to be a challenge? And is that a mistake to write off Republicans? That we've been talking, all the talk has been about the Democratic side.
If I may, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right. I think the Republicans...
But that is not DC, that is so STL.
Right.
Nice job, you guys.
Yes.
Way to go.
Yes.
All right. I think the Republican has a real chance in St. Louis County, and this is why. I think, while Rick Stream has been, he has said that he is not for the merger of the city and the county. His opponent, his yard signs have his last name and stop the merger. I think that will play in St. Louis County. I think that there are enough people that are just so vehemently against that, along with people who will vote Republican because they vote Republican, then I think the Republican has a very good chance of winning. And this time, I think to ignore that candidate and say he has no chance, I think that would be a real mistake. A real mistake.
I think there's an interesting storm brewing because, one, I think that there will be crossover. I think there's likely going to be independents who think, because St. Louis County has been Democrat for a while. I mean, if you look at the history of all the races, primaries, generals, I mean, it's a Democratic county. Now, is it overwhelming like the city? Probably not, but it's very blue. So I think, I think to say that I think a Republican will have a very hard road. But I also think that if there's a lot of crossover, which there may be, which I actually think would, probably take votes from Mr. Stream as opposed to Mr. Pusosa, that these people might be thinking, the Republicans, if I don't vote in this Democratic primary, I mean, I'm not going to have a voice in this election. And I think the Republicans have been through enough county elections to say, you know what, this might be the race, and so I'm jumping in. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens, but I think you're seeing a lot of talk about it.
Speaking of voice, on Twitter, our folks are saying that our neighbors living in poverty don't really feel like they have a voice in this primary right now. Are any of the candidates on either side speaking to the issues that we brought up earlier? Poverty's on the rise in St. Louis County.
It's doubled. I mean, and that's the really troubling part. It's doubled in the last 10 years. And not only we have much more very high poverty, meaning 40% of a census tract is under the poverty line, which we did not even have those census tracts 10 years ago, and now we have 2 of them, which is shocking. And then also just normal poverty, it's increased it's doubled in St. Louis County. And so I know Councilman Stanger has talked about, developing the Office of Community Empowerment to look at all the factors, that contribute to poverty and doing a full bore attack on each one of those, everything from, public safety to private investment into communities, into job creation. But it's going to take a full frontal attack on poverty to make, any, and to stop to stem the tide. That's what you're really concerned about, is it not getting worse. So I think it's going to take a full-on assault, and I think both candidates know that that's going to have to happen, because it's not getting better, it's getting far worse.
And as poverty goes up, people are less likely to participate.
Right.
And if the poor actually showed up at the polls in their true numbers, they would win every election. But they don't. And it's because there's a lot of distraction in the life of the poor. They're a very mobile population, and there are reasons that the voter turnout is so low among those who are poor.
Well, they're surviving.
They're
and
working
that,
on
and that
survival.
And that tends to
that
distract
gets in the
from
way
doing things.
of showing
yeah.
up, or they have the kind of jobs where they can't take off and go vote and come back. So the fact that poverty is going up, I think, only disenfranchises a larger number of people.
Is there a race component we should be discussing here in this race?
You can't ignore it.
You
I mean,
can't.
you have an incumbent who's African American, you have a challenger who's white.
Our
and-
first African American St. Louis County executive.
Right, countywide office holder, right. And so, and he was the first African American council member as well. So, I mean, he has, been a trailblazer in, two very big ways. So you can't ignore that it's there. And so, I think both parties have tried to keep that out. I don't think, but you can't say it's not there. I mean, it's been in politics in St. Louis forever.
But a lot of white people voted for Charlie Dooley in the
Right, he got
campaigns that he
elected.
has won. A lot of white people will vote for Charlie Dooley in this upcoming election. Is race a factor? Yes. I think race might be more of a factor if Charlie Dooley loses. Not that people will they just probably won't vote in November. Once again, that helps the Republican candidate. So I think that might play out. But overall, I think they have, really, it's kind of like, really, that this is about two people who don't like each other. And it doesn't really necessarily come down to one is black and one is white.
So can they do enough damage to each other to not be able to win in November?
Boy, that's the question. And I've said no to that. I don't think what's going on now would be so costly to the Democrat candidate that that's what would cost them. I think it will be an issue thing that could ultimately cost them the county executive office.
But it could spend down money, it could diminish campaign funds, and it is possible that something could come up in the campaign process so far for the primary that it will not go away by November. And so,
Well, and you're right on that. I mean, the division, we have a county executive who now has one vote on the council. I mean, so, somebody's going to have to govern after this is all said and done, and the council has clearly abandoned the county executive, and there's bad relations with the police, the first responders, the prosecutors. There's a lot of bad blood among the county and the municipalities, not the unincorporated areas, but the incorporated areas. And so I think the view of Clayton by all the municipalities is something that is also been bubbling up, and that one could increase turnout, which I think it will. But somebody is going to have to govern all that, and we're talking about major issues involving merger or reentry, and we have a lot of municipalities that are up in arms about what's going on now. So it's going to be a very interesting time. So there may be issues of, can that be patched up? And, that's going to be challenging.
Yeah, I think if either candidate had a redo and we go back a couple of years, I think they wouldn't have been so fast, Charlie, to get on that merger bandwagon. He could have been one who said, like, I'm not with it right now, and I think that would have helped him.
That sounds more like DC than STL doing things for their political
well,
advantage.
absolutely.
Then-
It shouldn't be a
And that's
political
hindsight.
decision.
Okay,
Right,
well,
so
that's the way the
hindsight.
world works. I won't start that can of worms. Let's go back to Amendment 7 and transportation tax. We've already established there is a very, I don't want to say unlikely, but not common coalition between the left and the right against
It
this.
crosses party.
Is this going to pass?
It's got some challenges, I think. I mean, my unique perspective was when I was in the governor's office, 12 years ago, we were having this same conversation. And so, the idea that we've done absolutely nothing of any value basically on our roads and bridges and infrastructure and transportation in 12 years is a huge problem. I mean, we're kicking the can again. And so I do think that's why you get some people who say, is a sales tax the best idea? One, it raises enough money. Two, we don't have, we have some legal prohibitions on toll roads, which is a problem. Gas tax doesn't raise enough money, and it's likely as regressive as your sales tax. So it's not the best alternative, but the other alternative is, are we going to do nothing? And 12 years passed and we did nothing.
If this doesn't pass, will the legislature say we tried, you decided, now we have no roads
What
and
happened
bridges?
last time?
In fact, if anything, I think the legislature would walk away saying, "Ooh, we got to quit putting tax increases on
Right.
on the ballot." With the Hancock Amendment, we took the power. We, the citizens, took the power of the state legislature to raise taxes and took it for ourselves.
The
And we-
Hancock Amendment says you can't tell us to
Yes.
do something you don't want to also help us pay for.
We have to
Yeah.
vote
to vote on
on we have
certain
to vote
tax
on tax
increases.
increases, and the legislature has basically refused to involve the voters. Nobody's putting on a general revenue tax increase. That just is not a question that's ever put to voters. The kind of questions
And
that
with
go out
term
are
limits, you can't.
well,
You'll get thrown out in a primary.
So they're putting out these little small revenue streams targeted very specifically, and people will say, well, yeah, we need better roads, so they're going to vote because this is the one that is out there. There are probably much smarter ways to do this, but this is the one that the legislature has put in front of us. And so this is the one this is probably the only chance we're going to get to vote on a
Municipalities like my own Kirkwood, if this passes, we're looking at like over 10% sales tax. And I think that's too much. It's more than a dime on every dollar you spend. I think people, that's enough.
Let's hold it.